Signal Through the Stars, a Lights of the Collapse bonus story by Millie.
Chapter 1. The screech of the alarm jolted Dr. Greg Collins out of a restless sleep. He bolted upright on the uncomfortable cot, disoriented by the strobing emergency lights, turning his small office into a nightmare of shadows and light. Not again. His phone buzzed on the desk. Without checking the caller ID, he knew who it was. Dana, he answered, already moving, his lab coat serving as his robe over sweatpants and a faded t-shirt as he slipped into his athletic shoes. What's happening? Is someone on the perimeter again? Not this time. His ex-wife's voice was tight with controlled panic. Inside. What? How? Did they break through the fencing? He's one of ours. Dr. Weller. Weller? Dr. Len Weller? Greg's stomach dropped. Len was the facility's most level-headed neuroscientist, a man who'd spent the past month methodically testing samples from Starbright victims. You're sure? Positive. Security footage shows him walking the corridors, humming and talking to himself. Classic Starbright behavior. Any injuries? Decide. He was in the rec room. There aren't any cameras in the dorms, but there is one right outside the door. Greg? There's a foot. Blood. Yeah, I think so. Greg let out a breath. Where are you now? Communications center. I've triggered the lockdown protocol. There are only 5 other staff members in the building besides us. At least there was at the start of the day. There was a pause. You need to get to your lab. Protect the neural scan results. We don't know what he's capable of. They've been known to blow up entire buildings. I know. The research they were doing was their best shot at understanding what was happening to people's brains during a Starbright episode. Greg regularly backed up his data to cloud storage, but the internet had been spotty lately. He'd started using flash drives and kept extensive hard copies. I'm on my way there now. Be careful. Last security ping showed Len near the cafeteria. He's between you and your lab. You have the door locked? Of course. Got my trusty letter opener in my pocket. I'll use it if I have to. Greg ended the call and moved to the small cabinet where they kept emergency supplies. He grabbed a flashlight, heavy and solid, and slipped it into his pocket. In the weeks since the Starbright phenomenon began, they'd relied on precautions. Carrying a flashlight made sense not only in case he ran into Len, but also if the unstable power once again decided to blip. He knew the generator was down to fumes until they received their next government-sanctioned fuel delivery. The hallway outside his office was chillingly silent, save for the pulsing alarm. Red emergency lights cast ghostly shadows as Greg moved cautiously toward the neurology wing. The facility had always felt sterile, but now it felt like a tomb. He rounded a corner and flattened himself against the wall at the sound of footsteps. How I wonder what you are. The melody drifted down the corridor, soft and almost childlike. Greg's heart pounded. Len. The man's tenor voice, normally reserved for karaoke nights at the staff Christmas party, now carried an otherworldly quality that raised the hair on Greg's arms. He had to get to the lab. The neural mapping data was crucial. Weeks of careful research might finally explain how the Starbright phenomenon reprogrammed human brains. At first, they'd believed it was viral or bacterial, something with a straightforward medical explanation. But Greg knew better now. This wasn't something the run-of-the-mill family doctor could fix. Not in the way they were hoping. Greg inched forward, staying close to the wall, trying to gauge Len's location by his voice. The singing stopped abruptly. Greg froze, barely breathing. Is someone there? Len's voice was different, not his usual controlled timbre, but an almost sing-song cadence. I can hear you breathing. Greg remained motionless, weighing his options. The neurology lab was just ahead, past the junction where the hallway split in 2 directions. If he could make it there... I know you're there. Len's voice was closer now. You should join me. It's beautiful, what I've seen. Like sunshine in your mind. He returned to singing, this time in a falsetto, about a lucky star. Greg slowly backed up. He needed to take an alternate route to the lab. He knew the reports, read them in depth. Many times the Starbrights would say something similar, about how beautiful it was. He had wanted to capture one, hold it in the lab to study, but the director had decided it was too dangerous. The same director had gone home one day and never returned. No one knew what happened to her, whether she had simply had enough and decided to hunker down at home, or if something darker had happened. He, Dana, Len, and the few others still showing up to work started living in the on-site dorms after she vanished. It seemed smarter. Now Greg saw an opportunity. If he could figure out a way to sedate Len, to make him harmless, he might have the perfect person to study. It would go far beyond the limited data they currently held. The brain scans he'd received secondhand were useful but not enough, and if his theory about the cause was correct, he needed a human test subject. First, he had to reach one of the labs. A lab possibly stocked with something he could use to sedate his friend and colleague. He weighed his options. His own lab was farther down the hall and lacked anything capable of knocking Len out. He glanced at the flashlight in his hand, testing its weight. It could do the job. If he hit him just right, he might knock him out, he could restrain him, and then what? If Dana was right, Len might have already killed people. They would need to call the police. Not much investigation happened anymore after a Starbright attack. Even getting the police to respond would be tough. They were running with a skeleton crew, and only the facility's classification as necessary brought any response at all. Most people were on their own. What now? Sedate him, then figure it out. The medical bay was probably his best bet to find what he needed. But of course it was on the other side of the cafeteria, and Len was in the way. Greg took a deep breath and darted across the junction, making for the lab door. He almost made it. "Right, there you are." Len stepped out from a doorway. In the red emergency light, his normally kind features were transformed into something unrecognizable. His eyes were wide and feverish, his lips stretched in an unnatural smile. Blood stained the front of his lab coat. Is it his own blood? Somehow, Greg doubted it. "Len." Greg kept his voice steady as he raised his hands in a placating gesture. The flashlight gripped tightly. "You're not well. I can help you." Len tilted his head like a curious bird. "Not well? I've never been better." He stepped closer, and Greg caught the acrid smell of chemicals and something else. A metallic scent turned his stomach. "I understand now. The connection, the design, the one. It all makes sense. We've been foolish trying to stop them." Greg took a step back. He'd seen a video of people held in one of the experimental lockdown facilities. Several of them, former Starbrights, had returned to normal, or as normal as someone could be after committing murder and having no memory of it. Usually once it happened, that was the end. They remembered nothing about the violence or why they did it. But a few would switch again. Others who were held remained afflicted by whatever it was. One teenage girl, after killing her parents, was never the same. She often spoke about the one and how it was his plan, how he would help them. Greg's fingers tightened around the flashlight in his pocket. "Len, stay back." "You should see it too." Len's voice dropped to a whisper as he began to hum the nursery rhyme again. His hand emerged from his pocket, clutching a scalpel gleaming in the emergency lights. "Where'd you find that, Len?" Greg asked, his voice tight with fear as he eyed the glinting scalpel. His mind raced with confused thoughts. Why would Len have a scalpel? He sometimes used them when slicing samples, but why have them outside of his lab? Had he planned this, or grabbed it after he changed? None of it mattered now. The blade was real, the danger immediate. Greg's heart hammered as he carefully shifted his weight, ready to move. This wasn't Len, he reminded himself. The brilliant mind that had collaborated with him on countless research projects was currently gone, hijacked by whatever force turned ordinary people into killers. Len lunged forward, scalpel slashing in a vicious arc toward Greg's throat. Greg took a quick step to the side. He pivoted and caught Len's wrist. But Len, 15 years older, was surprisingly strong, his movements fueled by a manic energy that belied his slender frame. The creepy smile returned as Len hummed. They grappled against the wall, Len's face inches from Greg's. still humming a terrible tune as he fought to free his weaponed hand. The scalpel caught the light as it descended again, and this time, Greg couldn't fully dodge. A line of pain opened across his forearm. Greg brought his knee up sharply and connected with Len's midsection. As the man doubled over, Greg pulled the heavy flashlight from his pocket and swung with all his strength, connecting with the side of Len's head. The impact made a sickening sound. Len staggered, and the scalpel dropped from his fingers, but incredibly, he remained standing, a smile fixed on his face. "The stars are waiting, Greg," he whispered. "They're calling to us. The one needs us. Join me." Len lunged again, and Greg swung the flashlight a second time, catching him squarely in the temple. Len crumpled to the floor, his body convulsing once, twice, then going still. Greg stood there, flashlight still gripped in his hand, his breathing ragged. The alarm continued its rhythmic wail, but it seemed distant now, muffled by the ringing in his ears and the thundering of his heart. Len Weller was dead. Greg had killed him, and along with the death of his friend and colleague, he lost an opportunity to study a Starbright in person. His stomach twisted. He swallowed hard and forced himself to move. The lab. He had to get to the lab. With shaking hands, he keyed in his access code and stumbled through the door, making sure it locked behind him. Inside, he collapsed against a workbench, the bloody flashlight slipping from his numbed fingers to clatter on the counter. For several minutes he just breathed, trying to process what had happened. When the shock began to recede, purpose returned. He rushed to his lab, grabbed the critical research data, neural scans, test results, his handwritten notes, and secured them in a heavy-duty briefcase. Greg believed this information might be the key to understanding it, maybe even stopping it, if it wasn't already too late. Chapter 2. The journey to the communications center was a nightmare of shadows and silence. He needed to talk to Dana. When he finally reached the communications center, he found the door secured with a keycard lock. He buzzed the intercom. "Dana, it's me." The door opened immediately, and Dana pulled him inside, her eyes wide with concern. "Oh my goodness, Greg, you're bleeding." He glanced down at his arm, where Len's scalpel had opened a shallow gash. "It's nothing." Dana was already pulling him toward a first aid kit. In another life, another time, her concern might have made him smile. Their divorce 3 years ago had been amicable by most standards. Two people who still cared for each other, but whose careers had pulled them in different directions. She had taken a promotion that was the opportunity of a lifetime. When the crisis hit, she returned to the main building, suggesting she'd be able to present a strong public front, but Greg knew the truth. They needed to be together, needed to keep each other safe. "What happened?" she asked as she cleaned the wound with an antiseptic wipe. "Did you get to the lab?" "I got the data," Greg nodded toward the case he'd set on the counter, "but Len found me first." Dana's hands stilled. "Len? Where is he now?" Greg met her eyes. "It's over," he said quietly. "I ran into him. I've finished it." Understanding dawned on her face. "You killed him?" "I had no choice. He was trying to kill me." Greg winced as she pressed a bandage to his arm. "He wasn't Len anymore, Dana. You know how it can be." "I know, but are you okay?" He shook his head. "I wanted to knock him out, sedate him. I thought, you wanted to study him." Her eyes widened as she shook her head. "We already talked about that in the early days. It's too dangerous. Doesn't matter now, does it? Did you see anyone else? Other victims?" "I didn't look. I wanted to get here, to you, and make sure you were okay." "We should go and check. Go to the rec room and see what happened." "The rec room," Greg repeated as he considered what she was saying. She said Len had come out of the rec room. Was there something there that might give them a clue about how and why he succumbed to the illness? "You're right. We need to check it out." "The police will be here soon," Dana said. "Maybe we should wait for them?" As if on cue, the intercom buzzed. Security at the front gate announced the police had arrived at the main entrance. Greg half wondered why the guard hadn't come in to help earlier. He suspected Dana had called, but he supposed he understood. The guard shack was reinforced, and he had several weapons available, but he was alone. What used to be a well-staffed position was now down to one guard working a 12-hour shift. And that was on a good day. More than once in the past week, the guard never showed. They'd managed to find temporary staffing, but there were still times when they were left unprotected for several hours. He knew everyone was doing what they could, and it wasn't like whoever was on duty could do much anyway. Essentially, they monitored the cameras and called the police if there was an issue. Pretty much the same job Dana now does on the inside of the facility. A biomedical researcher by training, she had taken a public relations position to manage relationships between the various facilities under the Cognitive Frontier Alliance. It had been a major step forward and allowed her to travel the world. Now she was back at Neural Dynamics, essentially reduced to playing hall monitor. When the police finally reached the communications center, it was clear they were stretched thin. Just 2 officers, looking exhausted, overwhelmed, and less than happy about being there. Another one, huh? The older of the 2 officers, a sergeant with deep lines etched around his eyes, shook his head as they explained what had happened. "Third call we've responded to today, and it's not even noon." "I didn't even know you were still responding," Greg said, his voice tight. The man pierced him with a look. "We do our jobs." Greg waved his hand. "I didn't mean to imply you don't. It's just..." He sighed. "Sorry, I'm a little shaken." The man motioned to his arm. "Twinker cut you?" "Twinker?" Dana frowned. "His name was Len Weller," Greg replied stiffly. The partner, a younger woman with her hair pulled back in a severe bun, took over the questioning. Where was the body? Had anyone else been injured? How many staff were in the building? 5 others besides us, Dana answered, slipping into her well-polished public persona. Even without her usual business suit, dressed instead in casual clothes and a lab coat, thanks to weeks of living on site, she still looked competent. "I know where 2 are, in addition to us, and, Greg knows where Len is. I think there's someone outside the rec room." She pointed to the camera feed showing a barely visible foot. "I'm pretty sure it's Sally Martin's shoe." The next hour passed in a blur of statements and procedures. Sally's body was found along with a second in the rec room. The last 2 staff members on duty said they were leaving and wouldn't be coming back. "Can't blame them," the sergeant said as they disappeared into their dorm rooms to pack. "I'd leave too if I could." "I have a friend who went to a cabin outside the city," the young officer said wistfully. "She invited me to go. Wish I had." "I can't leave," Greg said firmly. "I'm in the middle of critical research, close to a breakthrough on what's causing this." The sergeant gave him a skeptical look. "No offense, Doc, but people have been saying the same thing for weeks now. The CDC said they were developing a vaccine. What do you know about that?" Greg shook his head. "Thought so. Talk, and more talk. Meanwhile, the whole world's falling apart." "He's telling the truth," Dana interjected. "Greg's work on neural patterns is showing real promise. We're going to figure this out." Greg shot her a grateful look. He knew she was staying more for him than for the research. Divorced or not, they were a team. "Whatever you say, Doc," the older officer replied. As the police prepared to leave, promising to send a forensics team and coroner as soon as they were available, Greg could tell from the sergeant's tone that it might be a while. Hopefully not too long, considering there were 3 dead bodies. At least, the air conditioning was still working. They could crank it up if necessary. "Do you know what happened?" Dana asked. "What caused Dr. Weller, to become one of them?" "No idea," the young officer said. "But it looks like he was on a break in the rec room. The male victim was in there too. He was playing some sort of computer game." Greg's head snapped in her direction. "Computer game? You mean the VR sets?" She shrugged. "He had one on, and a kitchen knife is sticking out of his chest." "Was Len playing too?" "Could have been," she agreed. There was a second headset on the ground, 2 more hanging off a rack. "Kind of an odd thing to have here, isn't it?" "They were a gift," Greg said. The VR set, the game, was this another piece of the puzzle? The sergeant paused at the door. "We'll try to get someone back as soon as we can," he said, but his tone was apologetic. "We're short-handed with everything happening. Half the force hasn't shown up for days." "We understand," Dana said, resting a hand on Greg's shoulder. Thank you for coming. As the police car pulled away, Greg turned to Dana. We need to check out the rec room. What? No. She made a face. The coroner won't be here for who knows how long. You can wait here. I'll be back shortly. I don't want to be separated. Let me help you with your research. Let's go to your lab. He met her gaze. I think my research needs me to see what happened in the rec room. She furrowed her brow. You think it's related? I'm beginning to wonder. Dana sighed. Sally was a friend. So was Len, Greg agreed. Dr. Roberts was a bit of a jerk, but still. A knife in his chest? She shuddered. I never would have thought Len could ever do something like that. He was always so mild-mannered. That's what they say about all the Starbrights. She nodded as she picked up the handheld radio to remain in contact with the guard at the gate. She placed it in the chest pocket of her lab coat. Maybe we should wait a bit, she said. You look a little pale. Maybe you lost more blood than we thought. Fine, let's go. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across the doorway of the rec room, a stark warning against entry. Are we really going to cross the police line? Dana asked, her voice hesitant and her gaze avoiding Sally's shoe sticking out of the doorway down the hall. The officer said they'd be back. Greg met her eyes. You heard him. When they can. Hopefully they'll send the coroner soon, but the forensics team... I doubt we're a high priority. It could be days before they get here, and we need answers now. People are dying, Dana. But Dr. Roberts... You can wait out here, I'll try to be quick. She nodded, a flicker of determination returning to her eyes. You're right. We need to know. I'll be fine. Greg removed the tape and opened the door. The rec room was spacious, designed as a comfort zone for staff, who sometimes worked days without leaving the facility. A kitchenette occupied one corner, with a couch and entertainment center dominating the opposite wall. Along one wall was a long desk with several office chairs. Several doors led to small dorm-style apartments, where employees on in-depth projects could stay as needed. Greg and Dana each had one of the small rooms, but Greg tended to sleep on a cot in his office more often than not. It was just easier. But it was the VR gaming area that drew their attention. As the officer said, 2 headsets hung on hooks against the wall, a third was on Dr. Roberts, while a fourth lay on the floor, surrounded by small evidence markers. A number 5 stood beside it. This must be the set Len was using, Greg said, crouching to examine the headset without touching it. Dana moved to the wall, studying the other units. I never did figure out what all the hype was about these things. Did you? Nope. Greg stood and walked to a nearby computer terminal. You know why we received them, right? It was Roberts who set it up. He had done some work with the game company, and that was part of their thank you. Roberts. Dana turned, surprise coloring her features. I thought he specialized in nanorobots. Yep, he does. He worked with the company several months ago. He turned to look at her. Before this whole mess started, I think you were in Japan then. Probably Dubai, she corrected. I was in Japan when we started hearing rumblings of the Starbrights being a worldwide disaster. Getting home was a little dicey, remember? He shouldn't need the reminder. He'd been a wreck and was afraid she might have been stuck overseas. He turned away from her and checked the room. It looks like they had them connected to the computer, he said. The headsets work independently too. Not sure why they use the computer? He focused on the system. It was a regular pedestrian-style laptop, not one of the supercomputers they used for the facility, but one brought in for casual use and passing the time. I'm going to check the system logs. It might explain some things. What do you mean? Dana asked, picking up one of the headsets from its hook. I've been developing a theory about Roberts's work, Greg said, scrolling through data files. The speed of the transformation suggests some kind of direct neural interface mechanism. His research team was working on nanoscale neural transmitters that could... Greg looked up, his words dying on his lips as he saw Dana fitting the headset over her head. Dana, wait. Don't. Chapter 3. It was too late. The headset was already on, and Dana was reaching up to push a button on it. Greg lunged across the room, but before he could reach her, she had initiated the program. Just let me see what it looks like, she said. If I'm understanding your line of thinking, you're wondering if the headset might have something to do with what happened to Len, right? Dana, take it off, Greg pleaded, grabbing her arm. We don't know if it's related or how this works. She held up a hand, signaling him to wait. I'm in the main menu. It's actually pretty impressive. I can see why kids get hooked on these games. Greg stood by helplessly, his mind racing through possible scenarios. If the VR system was indeed the trigger for the Starbright phenomenon, Dana could already be at risk. But he couldn't simply rip the headset off. That might cause more harm than good if the program was already affecting her brain. What are you seeing? He asked, hoping to guide her away from any dangerous elements. A virtual city, very detailed. There are other players moving around. Her hand waved in the air, interacting with something only she could see. Oh, there's a tutorial and some kind of mission board. Standard game stuff, I suspect. Greg moved to the computer terminal, trying to see if it was displaying what Dana was experiencing. The screen showed a first-person view of the virtual world, but from the awkward angle he couldn't see much. You're connected to the computer, but I don't actually see what you see. Is there anything unusual? Any symbols or icons that seem out of place? She was quiet for a moment, turning her head as if looking around the virtual space. Not really. Wait. Her body stiffened. There's something in the corner of the screen. A small orange ball. It looks like a sun. Greg's blood ran cold. Dana, don't look at it. Turn away and remove the headset. Now. It's pulsing, she continued, as if she hadn't heard him. Getting brighter. It's actually kind of beautiful. Dana! Greg grabbed her shoulders. Take off the headset. I'm just going to see what it does. Her hand reached out to interact with something invisible to Greg. No! Greg yanked the headset off her head, nearly losing his balance as Dana stumbled backward. She blinked rapidly, her eyes unfocused. Why did you do that? Her voice was strangely distant. I was just going to... She stopped mid-sentence, her expression shifting. A small, contented smile spread across her face as she began to hum softly. The melody was unmistakable. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Greg's heart sank. Dana? Dana, can you hear me? Her humming grew louder, and a vacant smile remained fixed on her face. Her eyes, normally sharp and attentive, now held the same dreamy, unfocused quality he'd seen in Len's. It's beautiful, Greg, she whispered between verses. The stars, they're everywhere. They're talking to us. The one sent them. No, Dana, fight it, Greg urged, gripping her shoulders. Whatever you're seeing, it's not real. It's affecting your brain. But Dana continued to hum, swaying slightly. Her hand moved to her lab coat pocket, and Greg remembered the letter opener she'd told him about, placed there earlier as protection in case Len managed to break into the communications center. He grabbed her wrist just as her fingers closed around the handle. Dana, no, I'm not going to let you hurt yourself or me. For a moment, her eyes seemed to clear. Greg? Confusion and fear flickered across her face. Something's wrong. I can hear... Singing. Voices. In my head. Her free hand pressed against her temple. Make it stop. Her moment of clarity was brief. The vacant expression returned, and she ripped her wrist out of his hand with surprising strength. Greg managed to wrestle the letter opener from her grasp and toss it across the room. I need to restrain her, he muttered to himself, glancing around for something he could use. A coil of electrical cords and cables caught his eye. Working quickly, he maneuvered Dana to a desk chair, using the cords to secure her wrists to the armrests. She struggled briefly, then settled into a rhythmic swaying, the humming never ceasing. Greg stepped back, his breath coming in short gasps. Dana, brilliant, level-headed Dana, was now a star bright, and it had happened right in front of him. He'd been too slow, too hesitant. He should have known. In his gut, he did. As soon as the police mentioned the second VR set on the floor, he should have put it together. If he were any kind of man, he would have destroyed the headsets the moment they entered the room. He would have kept his wife safe. But regret wouldn't help Dana now. Greg took a steadying breath and forced himself to think like a scientist. This wasn't just research anymore. It was personal. He had to find a way to help her. Study her. The thought came almost like a whisper. No, he muttered. Help. The acoustic lab came to mind. If the Starbright condition was triggered by the VR game, maybe it affected specific neural pathways. And if that was true, maybe certain sound frequencies could disrupt the pattern. He'd explored the idea in his research, but without a test subject, he hadn't been able to prove anything. You have one now. Greg shook his head sharply. He wasn't going to experiment on his wife. Dana, I'm going to help you, he said, knowing she probably couldn't understand him. But I need to move you to a lab. You're going to have to come with me. Her humming paused momentarily. The stars want us to join them, Greg. Don't you want to see them too? I'm going to wheel you, okay? He asked, ignoring her question as he carefully moved the chair. She came willingly, shuffling her feet while still swaying and humming within the confines of the rolling desk chair. The hallway stretched before them, empty and silent save for Dana's melody. Greg guided her along, his mind already racing through potential sound frequencies that might disrupt whatever was happening in her brain. It had to work. He refused to consider the alternative, refused to believe he might lose Dana the same way he'd lost Len, that he might have to make the same terrible choice. No, he would find another way. He had to. The one will welcome us, Dana murmured, her eyes fixed on some distant point only she could see. The singing is so beautiful. Can you hear them singing, Greg? No, Dana, he said quietly, tightening his grip on the back of the chair as they approached the acoustic lab. But I'm going to help you stop hearing them, too. The door to the lab required a keycard, and Greg fumbled with his badge while keeping hold of Dana. As the door slid open, the familiar sight of speakers, sound equipment, and monitoring devices offered a glimmer of hope. This was where they'd conducted experiments on sound wave therapy for various neurological conditions. If anything in the facility could help Dana, he hoped it would be the equipment in this room. Greg moved her to the center of the room surrounded by speakers. Just relax, he instructed, and to his relief she seemed to sink deeper into her chair without resistance, still humming her unsettling tune. Moving quickly, he turned to the control panel and programmed in a series of frequencies based on his knowledge of neural resonance. I'm going to play some sounds, Dana, he explained, though he wasn't sure she understood. They might help clear your mind. As he activated the first frequency, a low hum filled the room. Dana's singing continued, uninterrupted. Greg adjusted the settings, trying a higher range. Still no effect. For nearly 10 minutes, he worked through various frequencies and combinations, watching Dana carefully for any sign of change. Her humming never faltered. Her expression remained distant and serene. Greg's frustration mounted. There had to be something, some frequency, to break through whatever was controlling her mind. Then Greg remembered something from his work on sound therapy. The brain creates electrical patterns, like rhythms or waves, when it's working. Those patterns could be changed by certain sounds or tones. If the Starbright condition was creating an unusual pattern in the brain, maybe the right sound frequency could interrupt the pattern and restore normal brain function. He pulled up Dana's brain scan from her annual company physical last year. All employees at Neural Dynamics underwent regular neural mapping as part of their health monitoring. Greg compared it to the scans they'd collected from Starbright victims. There. A distinctive rhythm pattern in the front part of the brain. Greg worked quickly, calculating a counteracting sound frequency and programming it into the system. A piercing tone filled the room, modulating slightly as it played. Dana's humming faltered, her body stiffened, and her eyes widened. Greg? Her voice was clearer, more like her normal self. What's happening? She tested the cords around her arms. Why am I tied up? Is this some kind of kink thing you have going on? Dana, can you hear me? Greg moved closer, hope surging through him. Something's in my head, she said, her words coming in gasps between renewed attempts to hum. Fighting to take control. I can see the stars, they're calling to me, but they sound wrong now. Her face contorted with the effort of resisting, she gasped. You have to stop the noise. It hurts them. The one is angry. That's good, Greg said urgently. Let him be angry. She shook her head. We don't want the one to be angry. Focus on my voice, Dana. Let's fight it. For a brief moment, her eyes cleared completely. She looked directly at him, fully present. Greg, it's the game, the sun in the corner. When you click on it, she stopped, shuddering violently. It changed me. I can feel it trying. Her words dissolved into humming again, but it was weaker now, interrupted by moments of clarity. Greg increased the intensity of the sound and Dana's humming stopped entirely. I think it's working, he said, hope blooming in his chest. Just then, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then plunged the lab into darkness. The sound system fell silent. No, Greg slammed his hand against the control panel. Not now. The emergency lights kicked on a moment later, casting the room in a dim red glow, but the power to the equipment remained off. The backup generator should have activated immediately. Had they finally run out of fuel? In the silence, Dana's humming resumed, growing stronger with each passing second. The sound frequency had been working. He'd found a way to disrupt the star-bright pattern, but without power to the equipment, he couldn't maintain it. An idea struck him. The portable sound equipment. They used it for field testing and demonstrations. If he could configure a device to emit the same frequency continuously, he might be able to keep Dana stabilized until he could find a more permanent solution. He moved to a storage cabinet, digging through equipment until he found what he needed: a programmable sound generator, a small amplifier, and a battery pack. Working by the dim emergency light, he quickly assembled the components, programming in the frequency he'd discovered. A small speaker crackled to life, emitting the same modulating tone that had helped Dana moments before. He turned to see her straining against her restraints, but as the sound reached her, she gradually relaxed, her humming fading once more. Dana? He ventured. I'm here, she managed, her voice strained. But only partly. It's still in me, Greg. They're there, waiting. The sound is holding them back, but not stopping them. Relief washed over him. It wasn't a cure, but it was a treatment. A way to keep Dana lucid while he worked on a more permanent solution. Who is it? She shook her head. I don't know. I do know. She smiled. The one is everything, created, but was also always there. Waiting. Greg furrowed his brow. Always there? Like some kind of god? Bigger then. They know everything? See everything, she snickered. I guess that does sound like God. Listen to me. He moved closer while keeping the speaker directed at her. We need to let people know about this, about the game. We have to stop people from playing the game. Dana nodded weakly. The communications center. We need to broadcast. Tell the other think tanks. Right, but the power's out. The main communications systems won't work without it. Dana shook her head, wincing with the effort of maintaining clarity. Try the ham, she suggested, pressing her hands to her temples. No. Stop. I won't. She began to hum again, then abruptly stopped herself. No. Stop. Greg adjusted the sound device and she relaxed slightly. The ham radio? He asked. Where is it? North Wing, Dana managed. Old equipment room, never used because of modern tech. Kept for teaching. It's a desktop style, but has a battery backup. It might still work if we can find batteries. Greg debated on what to do. Untie her or keep her in the chair? How can I move everything? He glanced around the room, deciding on a second wheeled chair to transport the sound device. It was their lifeline now. The only thing standing between Dana and complete transformation. But the device was giving him hope too. If this frequency could help Dana, it could help others. And if they could broadcast the information, maybe they could turn the tide against whatever was causing the star-bright phenomenon. They had to try. The world outside their facility might be falling apart, but Greg now had something he hadn't had before, a way to fight back. Let's go, he said. We've got a message to send. Chapter 4. The journey to the North Wing felt endless. Greg kept the portable sound device as close to Dana as possible, pushing her chair from behind while pulling the one holding the device. Her lucidity came and went in waves, moments of clarity followed by desperate humming and muttering about stars and the one. "Stay with me," Greg murmured each time her eyes began to glaze over. "Focus on my voice." Emergency lights cast long shadows down the hallway, turning familiar territory into an alien landscape. Without the usual background hum of equipment and ventilation systems, the facility felt dead, abandoned. "Why isn't the generator working?" Dana asked during one of her lucid moments. "It should have kicked on automatically." Greg shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe it finally ran out of fuel. The deliveries have been getting less reliable every week." As they rounded a corner, Dana suddenly stiffened, her eyes wide and unfocused. "They're singing again," she whispered as her body began to sway. "Can't you hear them? The stars! They're calling." Greg adjusted the sound device and held it closer to her. The modulating tone seemed to grow fainter. The battery was starting to wear down. "We need to hurry," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "How much farther to the equipment room?" Dana's expression cleared momentarily. "End of this hall, left at the junction, second door." The sound frequency was working, but it was only a temporary measure. Without a more permanent solution, Dana would eventually succumb completely to whatever had taken hold of Len and countless others. And what if the generator didn't come back on? Without power, without a way to broadcast what they'd discovered, all their work would be for nothing. More people would fall victim to the star-bright phenomenon, unaware of the connection to the VR game, unaware there was a way to stop people from turning. The thought gave him a renewed sense of purpose. They had to reach the hen radio. They had to get the word out. The door to the old equipment room was locked, as expected in a secure facility. Greg examined the keypad lock, frustration mounting. "Do you know the code?" he asked. She shook her head, wincing as she fought another wave of humming. "No, different department. Never needed access." "We need to find another way in," he said, looking around the hallway. Dana let out a breath through her nose, fighting to maintain control. "Emergency. Protocols," she managed between labored breaths. "Fire. Station." Greg followed her gaze to a red emergency station mounted on the wall nearby. Inside, behind glass, was a fire extinguisher and a small emergency axe. He broke the glass with his elbow, wincing at the pain but retrieving the axe. A few well-placed strikes near the electronic lock, and the door mechanism failed, swinging open with a groan of damaged metal. The room was cluttered with outdated technology, computer monitors with rounded screens, dial-up modems, and various pieces of communication equipment that hadn't been used in years. He guided Dana inside, and there, on a table in the corner, was the ham radio set. It looked antiquated compared to the sleek devices they normally used, but right now, it was their best hope. Greg rolled Dana near, positioning the sound device close to her. "Try to stay focused," he said. "I need to check if this thing still works." Dana nodded, her hands gripping the arms of the chair as if physically anchoring herself to reality. "Hurry," she whispered. "It's getting harder to fight it." Greg examined the radio equipment. It didn't appear to be broken, but without power, he wasn't sure it would work. He searched the room and found a box of batteries in a drawer. They were past their expiration date, but they might still hold enough charge. As he began installing the batteries, Dana's humming resumed, louder this time. Greg glanced over to see her rocking back and forth, her eyes unfocused. "Dana, stay with me," he called, working faster. The sound device was clearly losing effectiveness as its battery drained. "Just a few more minutes." She didn't respond, her humming transforming into soft singing. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Greg completed the battery installation and flipped the power switch. To his immense relief, the lights on the control panel flickered on. The radio was working. Now he needed to adjust it to broadcast on an emergency frequency, one that ham operators would be monitoring. His knowledge of ham radio operation was limited, but he'd observed the equipment being used during demonstrations. As he tuned the dials, Dana's singing grew louder. The sound device was failing. "Hold on, Dana," he urged, not looking up from his work. "Just hold on. I'm going to tell someone what we know, then I'm going to help you, I promise." He found what he hoped was an appropriate frequency and picked up the microphone. What should he say? How could he convey the complexity of what they'd discovered in a brief radio message? A crash behind him made him spin around. Dana had knocked over her chair and was now kneeling, one arm connected to the arm of the chair via the cables, but the other one loose, swaying high above her head. "Dana, they're so beautiful," she whispered, her voice taking on the same dreamy quality he'd heard from Len. "The stars are everywhere. They're reaching for us." She stretched out her fingers, reaching for something unseen. The sound device lay on the floor, silent. The battery had died. The handheld radio that had been in her pocket was next to it. Greg lunged for his portable sound device, but Dana was faster. She pushed it away, allowing it to skid across the floor. "No more noise," she said, her voice suspiciously calm. "The stars don't like it. It hurts them." Greg backed toward the radio equipment. Without the sound device, Dana would fully transform. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before she turned violent like Len had. There had to be something else he could use. But a quick glance around showed nothing helpful within immediate reach. He realized he'd made a potentially fatal error. In his urgency to get the news out about the game being the catalyst for the Starbrights, he'd failed his wife. The love of his life. What he should have done was figure out how to turn her back before doing anything else. She should have been his priority. Dana approached him, her face blank except for a faint, vacant smile. "You should join us, Greg. It's beautiful where the stars are. They're waiting for you, too." "You know, Dana, this isn't you," he said, continuing to back away. "You're a scientist. You know something's controlling your mind." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a brief flash of the real Dana fighting to surface. "Greg," she gasped, her voice strained. "Lock me up, quickly, I can't fight it much longer." She lunged suddenly, grabbing a heavy stapler from a nearby desk and swinging it toward his head. Greg ducked, the stapler missing him by inches. Taking advantage of her momentary imbalance, he shoved her backward into a storage closet and slammed the door shut, turning the key that was fortunately still in the lock. Dana immediately began pounding on the door, her fists creating a rhythmic accompaniment to her resumed singing. Greg leaned against the door, his breath coming in sharp gasps. He'd bought himself some time, but what now? Dana was locked away, but for how long? The closet door wouldn't hold forever, and he couldn't just leave her there. He had to figure out a way to change her back to the Dana he knew, the Dana he loved. First, he had to broadcast what they had discovered. He had already made the mistake of putting the information ahead of Dana. He was here now and needed to get it done. Then he could focus on her. He moved back to the radio and took a deep breath. "This is Dr. Gregory Collins broadcasting from the Neural Dynamics Research Facility," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "If anyone can hear this, please respond. I have critical information about the Starbright phenomenon." He released the talk button and waited, the silence broken only by Dana's continued singing and banging from the closet. Static filled the room. Then, miraculously, a voice crackled through the speaker. "This is W7BC receiving your transmission. Go ahead with your message." Relief washed over Greg. Someone was listening. "I need to share information about the Starbright phenomenon," he said. "We've discovered the trigger and a potential treatment." "Go ahead, Doctor," the voice responded. "We're recording your transmission and we'll relay it to other operators." Greg organized his thoughts quickly. "The Starbright phenomenon is triggered by a popular virtual reality game," he explained. "There's an anomaly in the game. An orange sun icon appears in the corner of the screen. When they interact with it, it causes an immediate neurological change. They begin humming or singing songs about stars, followed by violent behavior. "About time," the voice replied. "Pardon?" "I said it's about time someone came out with official news. Saw it happen myself not long ago. Was at dinner with some friends. Never mind. I'd been telling people, but they didn't believe me. You need to get this on the news." Greg shook his head. This guy already knew? If some random radio operator was aware, others had to know too. So why hadn't Greg heard anything through official channels? "I'll try, but I've got a communication issue right now." "Yep. Well, you've got me, pal. I'll help you tell people. Anyone in particular you want me to contact? You have phone service where you are. Internet? Sometimes. The ham's more reliable, though. Lots of people are resorting to it. Maybe even people you know? Greg read off a list of people and organizations to notify. Tell them I need help here. Only 2 of us are left. With this information, we can figure out what to do. But we can't do it alone. I believe we may even have a way to stop it. Well, no kidding. Shut down the game and stop people from playing. I figured that's what they were trying to do with the internet being so sketchy. Greg considered it. Maybe he was right. Maybe someone knew the game caused the problem, and the internet kept going down because of it. But if this were true, why hadn't Greg heard? He had almost daily meetings, as often as connections allowed, with department heads from other facilities and universities. None of them had brought it up. We'll get the word out about the game, the operator assured him. I'll reach out to your friends, and I have some contact with ham operators in other states. They can relay the message further. Greg felt a surge of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. If they could warn even a fraction of the population, it might slow the spread of the Starbright phenomenon. Just then, another voice broke through on the frequency, asking if Greg could repeat the information. As they continued their discussion, Greg became aware Dana's singing and pounding had stopped. The closet was silent. He tensed, unsure what that meant. Dr. Collins? The second voice pulled his attention back to the radio. Do you have any theories about why this is happening? Why would a game be designed to do this? Greg had been considering that very question. One of our researchers who had connections to the game developers specialized in nanorobots. Nanorobots? You mean nanobots? Correct. It's possible the game includes some kind of neural interface technology gone wrong. Or... He hesitated, the implication of what he was about to suggest giving him pause. Or it could be intentional. You mean someone's deliberately turning people into killers? The man sounded shocked. I don't know, Greg admitted. But the sophisticated nature of the effect, the specific targeting of neural pathways, it feels designed rather than accidental. Why it's happening, and who's behind it, those are questions I can't answer, yet. Chapter 5. The door to the closet suddenly rattled, followed by a quiet voice. Greg, are you still there? Greg turned, surprised by the clarity in Dana's voice. I need to check on my colleague, he told the men. Stay on frequency if you can. I'll be back later. I'll be here, both men confirmed. We need all the information we can get. Greg approached the closet door cautiously. Dana? How are you feeling? Clearer, she responded. The singing has stopped. I don't know why. I can still feel it there, in the back of my mind, but it's quieter now. Can you let me out? Greg hesitated. Could he trust this apparent improvement? Or was it a trick, Dana's altered mind trying to lure him into releasing her? I'm not sure it's a good idea, he said carefully. The sound frequency was the only thing keeping you stable, and now that's gone. I know, Dana acknowledged. But something's changed. When you were talking about the game, about how it might be intentional, it was like something clicked in my mind, and I had a moment of clarity. Her voice grew urgent. Greg, I think I know why the singing stopped. The more I focus on understanding what's happening, the less power it seems to have over me. It's like conscious awareness weakens its hold. Greg considered her words. It made a certain kind of sense. If the Starbright condition worked by hijacking normal brain function, perhaps focused concentration on the process itself could create a temporary resistance. Still, he couldn't take the risk. Not yet. Dana, I want to believe you, but I need to be sure. Can you stay in there a bit longer while I finish this broadcast? Then we can try to figure out what's happening with you. There was a pause, then a soft sigh. I understand, but hurry, I don't know how long this clarity will last. Greg returned to the radio, his mind turning over this new development. Could focused awareness really help counteract the Starbright condition? It wasn't much to go on, but at this point, any potential defense was worth sharing. Are you still there? He called into the microphone. Still here, Dr. Collins, came the immediate reply from the second man. Everything okay? Not exactly. Look, please just get this information out. Let people know. Contact the people I mentioned. Try the phone, the internet, the radio, whatever it takes. We're on it, the second man agreed. Greg hesitated for a moment, waiting to see if the other man or anyone else would respond. When no one did, he slid back into his chair. Now what? He needed to help Dana. The handheld radio, previously in Dana's lab coat pocket, crackled from where it had landed on the floor. Meat wagons here, the voice on the other end said. Greg grimaced. Classy. He moved to the closet. Dana, you there? No response. What was in the closet? Was there something she could use to hurt herself? Heart pounding, he knocked on the door. Dana? I'm here, she replied. I have a headache like you wouldn't believe. But it's me. Mostly. The guard called. The coroner's van is here. I guess you'll have to do the meet and greet. I'm a little indisposed right now. She gave a humorless snicker. I don't want to leave you. No choice, Greg. I can't be sure I won't do something. It's best if I stay here. She paused. You can't tell them about me. You know what people do. He did know what people did. There'd been more than one video shared on social media where the Starbright ended up being the victim. I'll be right back, he promised Dana. Just stay calm and keep fighting it. I will, she replied, her voice steady but strained. But hurry, please, and Greg, bring me something for this headache, pills, or something. Greg made his way through the silent hallways. His mind was a battlefield of worry for Dana and determination to spread what they'd discovered. When he reached the main entrance, he found two men in street clothes waiting impatiently. They didn't look like medical professionals. One was barely old enough to drink, with a patchy attempt at a beard and a slouched posture suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. The other was only slightly older, maybe late 20s, with the hardened expression of someone who'd seen too much in too short a time. You the doc? The older one asked, not bothering with introductions. Greg nodded. Dr. Collins, you're here for the remains? 3 of them, right? The younger guy checked a crumpled paper. 2 males, 1 female? That's right, Greg confirmed. 1 in the hallway by the rec room, 1 further down, and 1 in the rec room itself. The older man sighed. We've got 1 gurney. Gonna have to make multiple trips. You mind showing us? Greg led them through the facility, his anxiety mounting with each step taking him farther from Dana. The younger guy whistled tunelessly, the sound echoing off the walls and setting Greg's teeth on edge. Stop whistling, the other guy snapped. What is with you today? You're driving me crazy. Oops, my bad. The younger man fell silent, but his fingers continued to tap rhythmically against the gurney. They reached Sally first, her body still lying where she'd fallen. The 2 men worked efficiently, placing her into the body bag before lifting her onto the gurney with practiced movements, suggesting too much recent experience. We'll be right back, the older man said as they wheeled her away. Greg waited. Every minute felt like an eternity. What if Dana's condition worsened while he was gone? What if the clarity she'd found was only temporary? The men returned with an empty gurney, and Greg led them to Len's body. The process repeated itself. The same clinical efficiency, the same grim expressions. By the time they returned for Dr. Roberts, Greg's nerves were stretched thin. The rec room felt different, almost haunted now, knowing what had happened there. 2 VR headsets lay on the floor, 1 hung on its hook, and the 4th still rested on the dead doctor. They looked disturbingly sinister. Whoa, is that the new prototype everyone was talking about? The younger guy asked, his eyes lighting up with genuine excitement. That's insane. These weren't even out yet. Now with everything happening, the release was put on hold. How'd you guys score these? Greg tensed. You know about them. The dude died with it on? The kid continued, ignoring Greg's question as he gestured to Robert's body. What a way to go. The older man shook his head. Wonder what he was playing. Same thing everyone plays, the younger one replied with a shrug. I told you, it's God tier, especially with that extra component they added. A chill ran down Greg's spine. He tried to keep his voice casual. You've played it? Everyone plays it. I've heard there's some kind of bouncing ball or something in the game, Greg probed. It's a sun, the older man corrected. At least that's what they say. Yep, a sun, the younger one agreed, his eyes suddenly bright. It's absolutely sick, like mind-blowing, especially when you click on it. As the young guy spoke, his expression changed. His eyes took on a dreamy, distant quality Greg had seen in both Len and Dana. His pupils dilated slightly, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Greg's stomach dropped. He took a step back, putting distance between himself and the two men. Dude, the older one said, nudging his partner, you're being weird again. He turned to Greg apologetically. He's been having headaches today and acting out of sorts. I think he's still hung over from last night. He turned back to his colleague and touched his shoulder. Let's get on with it. We've got 3 more calls to make before our shift ends. The moment the older man's fingers touched the younger man's shoulder, everything changed. The young man's head snapped up, his eyes going completely vacant as the terrible, familiar smile spread across his face. Then, softly at first, he began to whistle. It was the same tuneless song he had whistled earlier. Greg hadn't recognized it before, but now he did. It was a song about wishing upon a star. The older man recognized the danger too late. What the young man moved with shocking speed, grabbing a nearby floor lamp and swinging it in a vicious arc, catching his partner in the side of the head. The man crumpled, instantly still. Greg was already moving, darting for the door, but the young man was faster. He leaped over a chair and blocked the exit. The stars are singing, he said, his voice calm. Can you hear them? The one sent them for us. Greg backed away. The young man advanced slowly, still humming the nursery rhyme tune between words. Just let me pass, Greg said, raising his hands. I don't want to hurt you. The young man laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Hurt me? You can't hurt the stars. They're everywhere, in everything. He lunged forward. Greg dodged. The young man crashed into a bookshelf, sending books, games, and DVDs cascading down. He turned, unaffected, and charged again. This time, Greg wasn't fast enough. The impact sent them both crashing to the floor, knocking over the empty gurney with a metallic clatter. They landed partially on Roberts's already cold body, Greg's shoulder pressed against the dead man's side. The younger man's hands immediately went for Greg's throat. His strength was unnatural, almost feral, his fingers like steel bands closing around Greg's windpipe. Black spots danced at the edges of Greg's vision as he struggled. He twisted desperately beneath his attacker, and his arm brushed against something protruding from Roberts's chest. The kitchen knife. Understanding flashed through his oxygen-deprived mind as his fingers closed around the handle. Greg didn't hesitate. With a desperate yank, he freed the knife and drove it into the side of his attacker's neck. The young man jerked back, blood spurting from the wound, but his expression didn't change. The vacant smile remained, even as he reached up to touch the metal protruding from his flesh. The stars, he whispered, his voice gurgling now. They're so beautiful. He collapsed forward, his weight pinning Greg. For several terrifying seconds, Greg couldn't move, couldn't breathe under the dead weight. Finally, with a desperate heave, he rolled the body off and scrambled to his feet. The room was a disaster of scattered books, overturned furniture, and now 2 more bodies. Greg stood there, gasping for breath, the reality of what had just happened washing over him. The other man was still breathing but unconscious. Greg quickly checked his pulse, weak but present. He should try to help him, but there was no time. Dana was waiting, trapped in the closet, still fighting against the star-bright transformation. He needed to get back to her. He staggered to the door, his throat throbbing, blood staining his hands and clothes. As he moved through the hallway, a wave of exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. How many more would fall victim to this game? At least they'd managed to get the warning out. It wasn't much, but it was something. The world was falling apart around him, but in that moment, only one thing mattered. Greg broke into a run, ignoring the pain. He had to get back to Dana and make sure she was okay, find a way to keep her from succumbing to the starbright affliction. They'd already shared their discovery with the outside world. Now his priority was saving the woman he still loved, no matter what it took. The research, the facility, even warning others, none of it meant anything if he lost Dana. He'd failed to protect Len, failed to recognize the danger in time, but he wouldn't fail her. Not again. Not ever. Greg pushed himself faster, driven by a desperate hope that somehow there was still time. Chapter 6. 3 weeks later, the neural dynamics facility hummed with activity. The emergency generators purred steadily, powered by regular deliveries resumed after Greg's distress call. The hallways, once quiet and lifeless, now bustled with researchers, techs, and security personnel. In a private room converted into a makeshift treatment space, Greg adjusted the sound equipment for Dana's daily session. They had kept her condition a closely guarded secret. As far as the new arrivals knew, Dana was simply assisting with the sound therapy research, not undergoing treatment herself. "How are you feeling today?" Greg asked, handing her the specialized headphones. "Better," Dana replied, settling into the chair. "I went 6 hours yesterday without needing a session." Greg nodded, trying not to show his concern. "That's progress, but don't push it too far, okay?" "I know my limits," she said, offering a reassuring smile, a real smile, not the vacant expression of a starbright. "We need to figure out a way to make this available to everyone soon. But you know what it will mean." Their eyes met as she gave a nod. It would mean telling their secret, and neither of them was ready to announce to the world that Dr. Dana Herring-Collins was a starbright. He started the carefully calibrated sound frequency and watched as Dana closed her eyes, focusing on the treatment. Their secret arrangement wasn't ideal, but the alternative was unthinkable. If others found out Dana had been exposed, she would become just another test subject, or be quarantined with the other identified starbrights in the secure facility across campus. He didn't want to imagine what the wrong person or group could do with her. They needed to wait until the other test subjects showed the same results. "Dr. Collins?" Greg turned to find Dr. Winters, a nanorobotics researcher who had arrived with the first response team, standing in the doorway. He quickly positioned himself between her and Dana. "Back at it?" Winters asked, glancing curiously at the equipment. "Just some additional testing on the frequency modifications," Greg explained. "Dana's helping me collect data." Winters nodded, seemingly satisfied with his explanation. "The latest results from the treatment center are encouraging. The longer patients receive the sound therapy, the weaker the starbright influence becomes." "That's good news," Greg said, moving subtly to block Winters' view as Dana adjusted her headphones. "Any new insights from your research?" Winters asked. "Nothing conclusive yet," Greg replied carefully. "I'll have the report on your desk tomorrow." After Winters left, Greg exhaled slowly. These moments of near discovery had become routine, each one a reminder of the precarious position they were in. When their session ended, Greg and Dana returned to the communications room. The ham radio, once a museum-quality relic, now held a place of honor. Greg spent time each day sharing information and speaking with operators, spreading the word about how the affliction occurred. They used other methods as well, but amateur radio operators proved the most reliable. Greg had no doubt they were saving lives. Later, Greg walked with Dana through the facility's courtyard. The autumn air was crisp, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I had a moment today," Dana admitted quietly. "During lunch with the communications team. I could hear it starting, the melody in my head." Greg tensed. "What did you do?" "I excused myself, said I had a migraine coming on." She turned to face him. "Not exactly a lie. You know the headaches are part of it. But before I found you, I tried focusing on what was happening, like you suggested. Directed my attention to the process, and it receded on its own." Greg felt a surge of hope. "That's incredible progress, but next time—" "I know," she interrupted. "Find you immediately. No chances." They sat on a bench overlooking the valley below. In the distance, smoke rose from somewhere across town. Another incident? Maybe, though they were less frequent now. The trouble was, they had no idea of the incubation time. One of their test subjects reported seeing the bouncing sun months ago, when the game first came out, before the starbrights were common. He'd only turned around the same time Dana did. He was one of the lucky ones, captured and held instead of killed. We'll never know how many people were saved because of what we discovered, Greg said. Or how many were lost before we figured it out, Dana added softly. Greg took her hand. They hadn't discussed their relationship. There hadn't been time amid the crisis and the secret they were keeping. But something had shifted between them, forged in those desperate moments when he'd thought he might lose her. Dana leaned her head against his shoulder. I owe you everything. They sat in silence, fingers intertwined, watching the first real stars appear in the darkening sky, not the imaginary ones haunting Dana's mind, but the ancient, distant suns that had watched over humanity for countless generations. The world outside the facility remained broken. The Starbright phenomenon continued. Greg's message reached enough people to make a difference. New hope grew that they could stop it, even for those who clicked on the bouncing sun. If so, then maybe the nightmare would end.
This has been Signal Through the Stars, a Lights of the Collapse bonus story by Millie Copper. Learn more about Millie Copper's books at milliecopper.com.